Welcome to the Big Book Roundtable and the Rico 12 family of recovery resources targeted at people from all backgrounds, faiths, and places dealing with addictions of all varieties. Rico 12 is also a resource for the loved ones of addicts. I'm Justin B. I am a child of an all-powerful and all-loving God and a multidisciplinary addict living in the miraculous recovery promised through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous as I try to apply it in my life. I'm blessed to be the moderator of this roundtable. I'm joined today by Nikki M. and David G. and super excited that they're here with me today as we read and swim through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous with you. Today, we're going to be reading in the foreword to the 4th edition, starting on page xxiii, that's Roman numeral 23, and continuing on to the next page. But before we get into that, David, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your childhood hero? Who was that, and why was that your hero?
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Nikki. My name is David Green. I am an alcoholic and an addict of many sorts. I am grateful for a recovery date, Alcoholics Anonymous, of August 8th, 1994, and an emotional sobriety date of 2019 in Xxiv Anonymous. And very glad to be here with you both today. You know, I was a big fan of professional wrestling whenever I was little, all the way up until I was big enough to know any better. And I think that's how part of my disease manifested, because I could become a character and do what they did. But anyway, there was one particular one there, and his name was Kerry Von Erich, and he was from Dallas, Texas. And he was just a bad dude. You know, he was a good dude, but he was a bad dude. And I don't know. I grew up with a lot of abuse and a lot of trauma, and I could hide myself into those things and really, you know, just, wow, I'm there. I'm watching all of this. This guy's my hero. You know, he'll defend me. And so it's kind of crazy now looking back on it. But at that time, the Von Erichs was absolutely my heroes down in Dallas, Texas. So thanks for asking that question.
Love it, David. Thanks for sharing that. Nikki, same question. Introduce yourself, and who was your childhood hero?
Well, hi, everybody. I'm Nikki M., and I'm a grateful member of many fellowships, and I am just so happy to be here with you gentlemen today. Such an interesting question, because I have to really make my mind go back, because you said childhood. And I grew up in an alcoholic household. So, you know, I was really into music and videos. It was, you know, MTV. It was when they really played videos back then. And Michael Jackson, MJ himself, was my hero. He had just come out with Thriller. You know, I was a dancer. I loved to dance. And, you know, my mom had me in tap and ballet, and he did, you know, all these things. And it was a time before there was an internet where you could read all the scandalous stuff. It was more positive things. It was music and art. And it's funny that if I think about it, he wrote that song, Man in the Mirror. I'm looking at the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways. No message could have been any clearer. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make the change.
Na 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 na. Love it. Love it. Had that song going in my head as you said that. Thank you, Nikki. Love it. Now, my childhood hero, looking back, and I don't get fanboy about anybody really. You know, I think I could go up and shake anybody's hand in the world except this one person who was my childhood hero. And it was John Elway, who was the quarterback of the Denver Broncos. For whatever reason, the first time I ever saw him play, I went, that is who I want to be in my life. And unfortunately, I'm not genetically gifted that way. I don't have the abilities to do that. But even today, he's been long retired. I think if I were to see him, I would probably go fanboy and ask for his autograph and go crazy on that. So John Elway. All right. Excellent. So we're going to dive into our big books here, and we're going to start and read the foreword to the 4th edition, starting on page xxiii. That's Roman numeral 23, going on to the next page. And we'll just finish up the 4th edition today as we go through that. I'm going to jump in and start reading. Forward to the 4th addiction, the 4th addiction, or the 4th edition, whichever way you look at it. This 4th edition of Alcoholics Anonymous came off the press in November of 2001 at the start of a new millennium. Since the 3rd edition was published in 1976, worldwide membership of AA has just about doubled. to an estimated 2 million or more, with nearly 100,800 groups meeting in approximately 150 countries around the world. Literature has played a major role in AA's growth, and a striking phenomenon of the past quarter century has been the explosion of translations of our basic literature into many languages and dialects. In country after country where the AA seed was planted, it has taken root, slowly at first, then growing by leaps and bounds when literature has become available. Currently, Alcoholics Anonymous has been translated into 43 languages. As the message of recovery has reached larger numbers of people, it has also touched the lives of a vastly greater variety of suffering alcoholics. When the phrase, quote, "we are people who normally would not mix," which is on page 17 of this book, was written in 1939, it referred to a fellowship composed largely of men and a few women with quite similar social, ethnic, and economic backgrounds. Like so much of AA's basic text, those words have proved to be far more visionary than the founding members could have ever imagined. The stories added to this edition represent a membership whose characteristics of age, gender, race, and culture have widened and deepened to encompass virtually everyone the first 100 members could have hoped to reach. While our literature has preserved the integrity of the AA message, sweeping changes in society as a whole are reflected in new customs and practices within the fellowship. Taking advantage of technological advances, for example, AA members with computers can participate in meetings online, sharing with fellow alcoholics across the country or around the world. In any meeting, anywhere, AAs share experience, strength, and hope with each other in order to stay sober and to help other alcoholics. Modem to modem or face to face, AAs speak the language of the heart in all its power and simplicity. Good stuff. And I'm sitting here, living example, modem to modem on Zoom, looking across North America here, from coast to coast, basically, north to south, and just grateful to be here with amazing people, David and Nikki. So, David, let's jump in and tell us a little bit of what your takeaway from this foreword to the fourth edition, some of the takeaways that you have that jumped out at you.
Well, thank you, Justin. Thank you, Nikki. I'm definitely glad to be here. As I mentioned in the last series of this, I sobered up on a third edition. So when the fourth edition come around, I welcome the change, because I was in that part of recovery where, change was good. But a lot of my fellows didn't feel that way. Some of the older members were definitely resentful at the fourth edition, the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous. And one of the biggest reasons why is because the number of the page of Dr. Alcoholic Addict changed from 449 to page 418 of the book. And acceptance was, the answer to all my problems today. And that had been a very big hit for a lot of people in my town. And so a lot of people were pretty sad about that. But for me, I welcome the fourth edition. And I think now, I've heard talk that they're looking at doing a fifth. And one thing I know that is never going to change, regardless, is going to be the first 164 pages of the book. That's just not going to change. And so I'm very grateful for that. You read it, when this came off the press in 2001, at the start of a new millennium. Since 1976, and you're looking at 86, 96, 20 plus years later, we're looking at 2 million or more than, God, I mean, look at the groups, look at the numbers here, look at the hand of God and the way it moved from 2 men to where it's at now. Drunks and addicts just don't do that. That has to be divinely inspired. And there it said 150 countries around the world. I think in 2013 I'd looked and it was like 173 countries. I'm sure it's much more now, I'm sure. But the very next sentence is very important to me, because it says literature has played a major role in AA's growth. And usually when I go to a meeting, that's one of the things that I really look for. Are they using literature? Because for me, that is so much more important than just sharing opinion, or, because our mind is still pretty sick when we come in here. And just because we've come to the meetings and stopped drinking or using or whatever it may be, it doesn't mean that I've recovered from a hopeless state of mind yet. And so literature playing a major role for me, it's been the only major role in my life that's been played ever since 1994. I was introduced to the Big Book then and fell in love with it, and it's still been to this day. As you read through the middle of that paragraph, it says, in country after country where the AAC was planted, it has taken root. And I think that's what we do with the people that we work with, no matter where we're at. We plant the seed. We're not responsible for it taking root. I think our higher power will take care of that. So I love how it says slowly at first. To me, that represents the spiritual experience versus the spiritual awakening. The awakening comes quickly. For me, the experience comes slowly. And so slowly at first was good for me. Then growing by leaps and bounds, then the awakening took place. Just like I know this is talking about the fellowship, but I'm looking at it a little more in depth than that. It's translated into 43 languages. I was working in West Texas back in 2013, actually. And there was a fellow that had come in, and he was Hispanic, and he couldn't speak any English at all. And he was wanting to get sober, and we were reading the Big Book, and he was very frustrated because he couldn't understand, and none of us at the table that night could understand him. So when I came home for days off, I came back to Oklahoma. I thought, man, how can I help this guy? I mean, when I go back, how could I help him? And so I began to ask God to show me. I was at Central Service in Tulsa, Oklahoma one day, and they had a Big Book that was written in Spanish. I thought, here we go. Thank you, God. And so I picked that up and I took it back to the meeting and I handed it to him. And although I couldn't talk to him about it or whatever, I would sit there and point to the page, and I would point to his page, and he would read along with the Big Book in his way while listening to a language he didn't understand. And as far as I know, when I left there, the man was still sober. He was coming to the meetings. He had his own book, and, the rest is history. But this is just so fascinating. I love this on the back page there, and there's so much more that I could dive into. But it says, this is widened and deepened to encompass virtually everyone that the first 100 members could have only hoped to reach. I love Zoom. I hated what COVID did to so many people, but I can tell you it come along at a time in my life when I absolutely needed it. I had acted out with a newer member in a group because of the sex addiction that I was suffering from at that time. And I had pretty much had been shunned from that group, and rightfully so. I mean, looking at it now, it was the best thing that ever happened. So, I'd kind of walked away from meetings with my head down. I was pretty humbled, and I was pretty sorrowful. And about that time, the pandemic hit and Zoom came along. And what happened, this says, create the fellowship that you desire. And that's exactly what I did. I jumped on Zoom. I began to do meetings all around the world. In fact, that's how I met you guys. And the rest is history. I've done Big Book studies all over the world now with 7 different countries in the last 42-week series of the Big Book, in-depth Big Book study that we did. I just love this. It talks about computers and participating in meetings online, sharing with fellow alcoholics across the country. And like you said, that's what we're doing here tonight. But it says in any meeting, anywhere, it doesn't matter if we're on Zoom or in person, where we're at. What I need to be sharing is what the book says right here: experience, strength, and hope in order to stay sober. And for me, it's not only to stay sober, it's to recover from that hopeless state of mind of self, which drives me to do all this other stuff to begin with. So, and I like how it ends, to help other alcoholics, modem to modem or face to face. We speak the language of the heart, empower and simplicity. And as we move through the rest of this book, especially from this point on, man, the simplicity that is outlined in these pages. People tell me it is so hard to read the Big Book. I don't see it that way. It is very simple, tons of history to back that up. And I just love what you're doing here, Justin, because this will reach more people that, like it said, than than they could have ever envisioned. That'll be the same for us. There's three of us sitting here tonight. We may not know the impact that this has across the globe for many years to come. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of that. I'm very grateful.
Yeah, thank you, David, and thank you for being willing to be a part of it. I'm humbled and I'm grateful to be sitting here among such humble but devout fellows of the fellowship. Beautiful. Nikki, what are some of your thoughts as we read through that page and a half of the foreword to the fourth edition?
Well, I noticed in mine, the word literature is, mentioned 4 times in that reading. So they're really talking about the literature, which my line out is always the big book. I need this book. That's what this program, this is how I get better, is going through the book, through the instructions from Nikki. Life doesn't come with a book. Well, if you burn your life into the ground, you get instructions called the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it says, the words have proved, my line out, and I think you and I have talked about this. Words matter. If I speak it, if I think it, I speak it, it becomes it. So these words have proved, which means they're facts, far more visionary than members could have imagined. I mean, I can't even imagine. It's like, they say when you die, who do you want to sit down and have a conversation with? It used to be a radical Jew named Jesus Christ. Now it's a guy named Bill W. I'd like to sit down and go, what were your intentions? Did you expect this? Did you see this happening? Because his magic book obviously did. And then, David touched on it here where it says, a widen and deepen to encompass virtually everyone. My line out says, Vision for You, page 160. And if you turn to page 160, Vision for You, it says, this is to be attended by anyone and everyone interested in a spiritual way of life. I think in our last episode, we talked about, so many different fellowships, or one of us touched on that. There's there's multi fellowships, but we could just sit in the rooms of AA with an AA big book, and everyone and anyone interested in a spiritual way of life, this is for them, even without picking up a drink, and I love that. And down here where it talks about AA speak a language of the heart, which in my world is, what does the book say? Justin, one of the questions you asked recently or a while back was, if you could do something. I think Ashley and myself, we wanted to grow gardens, and you said you want to speak multi-languages. Well, I just came from Luxembourg. My boyfriend speaks 7 languages fluently. For 5 years, I'm supposed to take French classes so I can even converse with his mother. Okay. But for the past 5 years, as David said, with COVID and being such a blessing in such a dark time, I've only learned the big book language. That's what I speak. Someone called me today, Nikki, do you do outreach? I said, I speak the big book. What is it? She started, first word, I have a resentment, open to page 66. Let's talk about resentments. So this is this language of the big book. I can talk to anybody with any addiction or affliction wanting a spiritual way of life. And as thank God for the family of Rico 12. Noodle with Nikki's hosted there, all these great things. And without that, I would have died, because during COVID, I did lose all my rights in my country, Justin. I was not allowed. I didn't follow the government mandates. And so I was not allowed in buildings, hospitals. I wasn't allowed into grocery stores without, what the government wanted. So my online meetings were the only way for me to stay connected with the fellowship I crave, with the big book, and my sponsor, my sponsees. I really relied on that. So everything, I really believe page 124 that, my dark past, even the world's dark past, whatever's happened, even yesterday, is our greatest asset. So COVID, the miracles being born out of that dark period. And I just love it. And I love this too, new customs and new practices. Each group is autonomous. So if your group does something, great. Let me know how that works for you. If our group or our Rico 12 or Noodle or David's, workshops for traditions and all the stuff he does, he can have his own customs and practices as long as it doesn't affect us as a whole. but each group is autonomous. So, we have a wide variety here of things that we can do here. This is what I love about AA. It's limitless expansion. Limitless, it talks about on page 275 in one of the stories. Limitless expansion here. Thank you, Justin, and thank you, David.
Thanks, Nikki, and thanks, David. Just real quick, one of the things that jumped out at me, and this is a quote from page 17 of the book: "We are people who normally would not mix." And when that was written in 1939, it was like a visionary. It was prophetic almost. But man, I live that in my life every day. People I sponsor, my sponsors, people that have sponsored me, or people that there's no way that in my day-to-day life I would have ever gone up to him and said, "Hey, I'm Justin. let's go get a drink. Let's go do something." I never would have. But the expansion of my mind, of my openness to people has been immense in recovery. And I owe that to the principles and the words of the program of action, this program of action. All right. Well, some questions that I have for you, David and Nikki. I'll start off with David. I find it interesting that you said that in 2001, when this came out, and if I remember right, you came into the rooms initially, or at least it took hold in 1994, and that would have been about 7 years between the time you got sober and the time that the next edition came out. And in my own, and this is just observational, but in my own story, 7 years was when I was ready to change, when things got 7 years in a lot of things, whether it be my marriage, whether it be my job, whether it be recovery. At about 7 years, I had this, I need a change. I need something to switch. I need something to shift just a little bit and gain a different insight. And I find it interesting that it happened then. Why do you think, though, and I don't know that it had anything to do with 7 years, but David, why do you think that you were ready for a new edition, for the fourth edition to come into play?
Thank you, Justin. I feel that I had read and studied all of those years. And whenever it brought new information and different stories, it was good for me. But I think what happened, I had a miraculous spiritual experience at about a year and a half into Alcoholics Anonymous. My youngest son had drowned when I was 9 months sober, and I just went through a really hard time right there. And I really thought I was going to drink. I thought I was going to die. I was going through all that stuff. And someone introduced me to the Big Book. I'd already been reading it, but they sat me down and began to walk me through it. And I had a miraculous spiritual experience. And the more that they gave me, the more I wanted. And about that time, I met Charlie P. of Joe and Charlie. And, Charlie became one of my earliest sponsors in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I think, to answer your question is just that change is good. The only pain to it is the resistance that I've had for it in whatever area of life that may have been. And I can remember Charlie telling me, that God's ever advancing creation is always changing, always. And if I'm resisting that, then I'm going to have trouble. And, I have had from time to time in other areas of life, but never with the Big Book. I've always welcomed more and more. I can remember one time there was a group of guys that were going through the book line by line, turning sentences into question marks. And this is still something that goes on today. And in the back of the book, whenever I started doing this with these guys, they had me to write Bill W.'s name on one page and Dr. Bob on the other. And they began to list all of the guys that got sober under these guys all the way. And this went on forever and ever. And at the end was my name. And they said, okay, now you're in this beautiful lineage. And so I took this back to my sponsor and I was like, man, you're not going to believe this. Look at this. And this was in this new fourth edition. And he said, I said, what do you think of that? And he said, I think you ought to throw it in the trash. And I thought, well, I'm not going to say what I said, but that's not a very good way to look at this. And I said, why do you say that? And he said, because there's one name that's not there. And I said, well, I know your name's not in there, but we'll get it in there. And he said, I ain't talking about you. And he had some words to say as well. And he said, I'm talking about the word God. I don't see God's name in there. So throw it in the trash. So I don't really care what addition, what changes that come, if it doesn't include a power greater than self, my understanding of that, which I choose to call God, then it's not worth me reading or even looking at. But that has definitely not been the case with this book. And so I'm very grateful for that. And man, it's just a beautiful way of life. I can't imagine my life without this book. I was on a podcast one time, and a guy says, all right, ship's going down. You get the family off, you get them safe, you're jumping off, you're doing this and this. You got one book you can grab to save your life. What is it? What a stupid question, man. Because without this book, I wouldn't have been on the ship to begin with. If I had been, I'd been drunk as hell or killing somebody or shooting holes in it to watch it sink with them on it, you know. So I'm definitely grabbing the Big Book, Alcoholics Anonymous. I promise you. It didn't only save my life, it saved a lot of other people's as well. So thanks, Justin. Glad to be here.
I love it. Thank you, David. And I love that analogy, that imagery I've got of the Big Book basically being the life raft, getting off the boat and helping others off the boat with it. Good stuff. Thank you. Nikki, in one of the last recordings we did, you talked a little bit about how initially recovery groups were like a group therapy. Throw a loony or a toonie in the basket as it goes by and you get your free therapy. On this page, it talks a lot about literature, and you hit on that early in this. Tell me a little bit about what a healthy recovery meeting looks like in regards to recovery, and what an unhealthy one looks like in your experience. And let's go into the reasoning for why literature is so important in those meetings.
Oh, that's a wonderful question, Justin, because I almost died in other rooms. I'm in the Fellowship of Sex and Love Anonymous. They have their own book, an SLAA book. There is an Al-Anon book. And if in Al-Anon, I hope I'm always wrong, but no one's ever told me that the Big Book is not literature approved in Al-Anon. So, which is absolutely insane to me. So when I was in these rooms and we're reading, watered down literature, that was part of the problem. And then the other problem was it'd be new literature every week. If it wasn't the basic text that they were reading, it was a flyer, a pamphlet, 21 questions, or these type of things that don't give me the exact instructions. So what I'm looking for is I'm looking for people with big books. I'm always shocked when I walk into a meeting and there are no big books, or especially in AA, because sometimes they don't have the big book there, even in AA meetings. And that always shocks me. Or, another thing I'm looking for is I'm not looking where we're reading pages, someone's doing the reading and you're reading 5 pages or 6 pages. They go around reading, because that's just reading the book. It says, these are the steps we took, not the steps we read and talked about. So if we're just talking and reading, and a lot of the time it's not talk about what we just read. It will be talk about how my cousin's mother's brother's sister's, lover did this. And how is that helpful? Or that person couldn't get a babysitter tonight, or these things which are where in the book, what are we I need the basic literature. I'm already driven by 400 forms of madness. That's 100 forms of fear, 100 forms of self-pity, self-delusion, and self-seeking. So to keep my mind on my magic magnifying mind on this book, we've been able to break down page by page. We haven't gone much more than a page and a half, maybe 2 at maximum, because it's a lot of information. So I'm looking for literature when I walk in, the big book. See, on page 87, it does say there are many helpful books, but I always remind people that's after the big book becomes a working part of your mind. I do read other things, but I'm still learning, obviously, my big book, my magic book. So I'm always looking for people, a key line, who are armed with the facts. And if I'm in a 12-step program of recovery that comes with a big book, I want to make sure the people that are in there are armed with the facts and speaking about it. I hope that answers the question, Justin.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nikki. I really appreciate it. We're going to jump into the 1-minute wrap up here from each each of us. But man, such good stuff. I'm so excited about this. David, why don't you take 1 minute and what did you take out of this conversation and this reading that we've had today that you will apply into your recovery life?
Well, I think the fact that, that online meetings and technology and the way that we do things is not going away. It's just not going away. Thank God. And I'm going to continue to take that and use that not only to help me in my recovery, but to help others in theirs. There's a lot of people that I will probably never meet in person, maybe even you too. I don't know. But I do know that because of this now, we will have a bond always. And, not only because of what we do, but because of how we do it with this AA book. And so I'm just very grateful for all of this. And I don't know, I just continue to take away love and more information and more recovery each and every time we do one of these. So thank you for that opportunity. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it. Nikki, you're same thing. What's your takeaway from what we've read and discussed today?
Well, this is a visionary book. And my line out when it says 43 languages, I had a sponsee, Sergio, in Portugal, and he translated our 30-page Big Book workbook for me into Portuguese. I mean, all of this is coming true. But what you really mentioned, Justin, was we're people who would not normally mix. I mean, I wouldn't be here just hanging out with you guys just for the fun of it. I want something from you. Remember, I'm a retired burlesque entertainer. I'm a praying mantis with men. So I don't want anything from you guys. I want David to get a good night's sleep, and you too, Justin, after all this God work that you do. But that's it. I want nothing in return. We're people who would not normally mix. And, I love you guys. That's the other thing. I'm learning agape love. I'm learning unconditional love with you guys, looking at you as children of God, not men that I can roll over at a nightclub and find out how thick your wallet is. This is a miracle for someone like me. So I'm grateful that I'm being reborn, and it's taken root slowly, and that vision, the vision for me, the vision for you, is all coming true. Thank you, both of you guys.
Thank you, Nikki and David. My takeaway is about the literature. If I'm somebody who wants to learn about Judaism, I need to read the Torah. If I'm somebody who wants to learn about Christianity, I need to read the Bible. If I'm somebody that needs to learn about recovery, I need to focus on the Big Book. All of these other, I have a lot of other materials. I have the White Book of SA. I've got several other manuals and books of these different fellowships, and they're great. They're good. But their commentary on the Big Book, I need to get to the core of it. And the commentary is great, but the core is where it's at. And that's my takeaway. Thank you. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here and recording this. And thank you all in the listening audience for being here and listening with us. To learn more about what we're doing, please go and check out the show notes. Go to rico12.com, look at that, and see where you can connect with us and follow us in other places that you may be interested in. Come join with us in the fellowship of the Spirit and trudge this adventurous and amazing road of happy destiny with us. This is good stuff. Next time we get together, we will be getting into the doctor's opinion. I'm excited about that. The doctor's opinion is so powerful. More Roman numerals that many people jump over, but this is so powerful, and I'm excited to do it. Work it, everybody. You are worth it.